The Blue Eyes White Dragon. For many duelists, it's the most iconic Yu-Gi-Oh card in history, beating out the Dark Magician, Exodia, and even Nirvana High Paladin. Kaiba's ace monster is the focal point of the very first on-screen duel, and it's loomed large in the psyche of everyone from dedicated tournament grinders to playground players ever since. It's been slapped on toys, games, cereal, and private jets. The card itself is very clear about its place in the game. It is virtually invincible, an awesome creature. But was it ever actually good? Despite the fact that Blue Eyes has been a factor in almost every one of Yu-Gi-Oh's most iconic duels, despite the fact that Kaiba thought it was so strong he tore up the last remaining copy to prevent it from being used against him, despite the fact that Seto sacrificed God, this monster's kinda shit, right? 3,000 attack, 2,500 defense, 2 tributes, no effect. That's it. What you see is what you get. No matter how many Team Samurai X1 videos or seething meta duelist cries salty tears compilations you watch, this card belongs more in the dumpster than in your deck list, right? Well, not exactly. Yes, Blue Eyes has a reputation as the deck of choice for 11-year-olds and your average r/Master Duel poster, but would it surprise you to learn that it's actually been metagame relevant about a half dozen times since Atem first mind-crushed Kaiba? Today, we're going to be exploring the complete competitive history of the Blue Eyes White Dragon. Let's take a trip back in time. Before the dawn of history, ancient pharaohs played games of great and terrible power. Last week, I went 2-2 at locals with Snake Eyes. And between these two historical events was 1999. The new millennium was right around the corner, the planes hadn't hit the towers, and in some boardroom at Shonen Jump, an executive team had just decided to make Kazuki Takahashi's wildly popular card game manga into a playable product. In December of that year, the EX starter box was released in Japan, and it included a copy of Kaiba's Blue Eyes White Dragon. Now, at this time in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, the rules were more like suggestions. The advanced rulebook hadn't even been written yet, and gameplay resembled a slightly more complicated version of War. As a result, this 3,000 attack point monster, no tributes necessary, took the format by storm as the biggest boy available. This early peak for the boy in blue was cut short when the advanced rulebook was released, alongside a series of rules designed to slow the pace of play by requiring tributes for high-level monsters. The Blue Eyes White Dragon still lingered in lists. He was, after all, a great monster reborn target, but he'd already been dealt a devastating blow before he even made it stateside. Enter over a decade of drought. For the next 14 years, the Blue Eyes White Dragon was the literal stuff of legends when it came to competitive. Occasionally, it'd show up in a child's locals list a few seconds before someone smarter advised them to play something better. Yu-Gi-Oh grew with terrifying speed, and as Gemini Elves became Blackluster Soldiers, became Cyber Dragons, became Stardust Dragons, became Utopia, a 3,000 attack point vanilla was left further and further in the distance. Then, in 2013, Konami made a decision that would guide the next decade of card design. In September of that year, Konami realized there was money to be made in milking the first series anime. Armed with millions of forum posts featuring Kaiba Yaoi in a folder titled Market Research, they released the Saga of Blue Eyes structure deck. This deck had everything. An incredibly powerful enabler for the strategy in Maiden with Eyes of Blue, an impressively strong tuner in the White Stone of Legend, and a payoff that let the strategy keep up with Yu-Gi-Oh's ever-changing summoning types. Armed with these tools, the deck was poised to be a top player in the upcoming format. And honestly, if it had been released just a year earlier, it might have been. But unfortunately, the Blue Eyes White Dragon structure had the misfortune of being released right after the literal most powerful pack in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy. This set introduced the Dragon Rulers, a series of fire, water, wind, and earth dragons whose power level was so high, it choked the life out of the format, including Blue Eyes. See, it turns out these cards aren't as strong as they read. Maiden with Eyes of Blue can be beaten by a quick effect negation in response to her effect. The White Stone of Legends attribute was a liability in a format full of elemental dragons, and while Azure Eyes prevents your board from being popped, so does Mecha Phantom Beast Dracosack, and Dragon Ruler could make 2 of those. That said, Blue Eyes didn't exist exclusively in the shadow of better decks. Clever players realized the new Blue Eyes cards might not be sufficient to make their own deck top tier, but they might be able to supplement some already powerful strategies. Dragon Ruler ruler needed a ton of dragons for fuel in order to summon their devastating daddies, so they began playing 2 copies of the White Stone of Legend to pitch alongside the babies and 2 copies of the Blue Eyes White Dragon to search and banish afterwards. Space in the extra deck was pretty loose as well, so many players also opted to play an Azure Eyes for the one game in 100 where they had an errant 8-star on the field and a 1-star tuner in their grip. The anti-meta deck during this period, Spellbook, also used some of the cards from the structure, occasionally opting to play the Spellcaster type Maiden with Eyes of Blue. Her effect could be triggered by targeting her with the Spellbook of Power. She was a decent defensive option to summon off of Spellbook of Judgment, and if worse came to worse, an Azure Eyes and a Blue Eyes was at least a speed bump to the incredibly aggressive Dragon Ruler strategy. Blue Eyes might have just been a barnacle on the back of the 2 best decks, but it was still being represented. Times were good for owners of Kaiba body pillows. Then, a ban list. Overnight, Dragon Rulers became a shell of their former self, and Spellbook became completely unplayable. While Blue Eyes would hang on as an engine in Dragon Ruler until the daddy's eventual banning in 2015, times were once again tough for the legendary dragon. Konami had tasted blood in the water. The saga of Blue Eyes White Dragon structure had outsold almost every single structure deck before it. The press generated by anime fans after hearing that Blue Eyes was playable in something metagame relevant was too much to turn down, and almost as soon as the Blue Eyes White Dragon disappeared from deck lists, Konami began designing its final form, a series of Blue Eyes support so powerful nothing would be able to stand against the engine of destruction. In April of 2016, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Movie Dark Side of Dimensions was released. This movie, a sequel to the first series anime, deals with the lives of the main characters after the Pharaoh returned to his own time. But most specifically, it deals with Kaiba's desire to duel him again. This movie was manna from heaven for Kaiba stans, and featured him summoning new monsters, making new plays, and most importantly, winning. The movie debuted alongside a new set, the Dark Side of Dimensions movie pack, and a few months later, Shining Victories, a set designed to improve on the cards injected into the meta through the film, released to the public. This set had all the tools necessary for Blue Eyes to take to the skies. The first was Blue Eyes Alternative. This monster checked all the boxes. It was a free summon, it could remove a card on the field, and while it couldn't attack, it was perfect for summoning a synchro monster after using its effect. It would do so alongside the White Stone of Ancients, an impressively powerful tuner which added a Blue Eyes to the board at end step. And of course, the deck's synchro monster of choice, the Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon. This is one of the most cynical cards I've ever seen printed ever. At the time of its release, the top decks were considered to be Monarch, Burning Abyss, and Performapal Pendulum, and this card was designed from stem to stern to counter the top strategies in the TCG. For Domain Monarch, the deck could use Alternative to remove a tribute summoned monster from the field, unlocking the extra deck. For Burning Abyss, Spirit Dragon has a random graveyard effect negate attached to it, and for Pendulums, it has a baffling line of text that prevents any pendulum summoning in the first place. This new Blue Eyes White Dragon strategy hit the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community like the Blue Eyes White Dragon on Playgrounds in 2002. Unsurprisingly, this deck took the 2016 Worlds format by storm. At the event, the finals was a closeout, with both players representing the Blue Eyes White Dragon. Sure, the deck was bricky, and yes, it had some weaknesses, but it was head and shoulders better than anything else being played. This dominance continued throughout the post-Worlds environment, eventually integrating new cards like Galaxy Soldier to send bricks from the hand to the graveyard and convert them into meaningful advantage and powerful bosses like Cyber Dragon Infinity. What eventually removed the Blue Eyes White Dragon from top tables wasn't a ban list, but the release of a historically powerful pack in Invasion Vengeance. This set was unbelievable. It introduced the Paleozoics, the second wave of Metal Foe support, Danglong, Totally Awesome, and more into the metagame. Spirit Dragon was a boss built to beat a very specific series of cards, and once new meta monsters reared their heads, there wasn't much it could accomplish. Soon, tops dried up, and Blue Eyes went back in the binder. But the story doesn't end there. In 2017, Yu-Gi-Oh! Broke. Raging Tempest included the release of a number of powerful cards, but none more immediately impactful than the Zoodiac monsters. The rise of Ratpier is a story for another day, but suffice it to say, these critters completely overwhelmed the metagame. Once the second wave of support was released in Maximum Crisis, there was really only one deck worth playing, Zoodiac. Ironically, this boded well for Blue Eyes. See, there was another card in the Dark Side of Dimensions pack which lined up pretty well against the Zoodiac menace. The Zoodiac monsters had a little bit of trouble pushing through big guys. They cleaned up boards by way of a targeting pop effect, and they frequently ended their turn with a defense position Trident with a whopping 0 defense. Enter the Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon. Like Spirit before it, Chaos Max was a dragon for its time. It couldn't be targeted or destroyed by Trident, early Zoodiac builds didn't play a reasonable main deck out, and the double piercing meant an unaware defense position monster could end the entire game. Because of its incredible application against exactly Zoodiac, decks playing this monster have a smattering of tops throughout 2017. But let me be explicitly clear, the deck was not great. Yes, it could occasionally clear at a premier event, but as the metagame developed, Zoodiac pilots stopped being caught with their pants down. And of course, you do still have to live the dream and only hit Zoo on your run. People were still playing decks like direYGO and Paleozoic. And that's it. 3 total appearances. At the game's genesis, as an engine in 2 much better decks, and as a cynical meta call in 2 formats designed to generate a headline that reads Blue Eyes wins Worlds. Not the nothing you may have been led to believe, but about as impressive as Kaiba's on-screen win rate. But that's okay. The importance of the Blue Eyes White Dragon has always been its mythology, and within the context of the anime, it represents a physical manifestation that legendary cards are only as powerful as the duelist who wields them. I guess what I'm saying is, it kind of makes sense that it's mid. As an addendum, I figured I'd mention some forgettable but corner case places where people played the Engine of Destruction. In 1999, Ultimate Offering was released in the OCG. Its effect was not super clear, and as a result, many people believed they could just summon high tribute monsters for free using its effect. Obviously, Blue Eyes was very powerful until people figured out how the card worked. In January of 2006, Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon was released in the TCG via a Shonen Jump promo. This coincided with Reaper format, a historic format centered around the interaction between Last Will and Cyberstein. The monster you'd summon off of Stein was almost always Cyber Twin Dragon, but there were corner cases where Ultimate was preferable. When Saga of Blue Eyes released in 2013, there was renewed interest in the YCS side event Sealed Structure deck, in which individuals would play a structure against each other. The Blue Eyes mirror is super fun. Managing Maiden is a blast. In 2016, Duel Links was released. This game has a curated card pool, and Konami bent over backwards to ensure that Blue Eyes came to the application way before it would have been historically prevalent. Blue Eyes has been a tiered meta deck in Duel Links dozens of times, and it's often the best deck on the app. In 2018, Speed Duel was released. Its first format, composed of cards found in the 2 starter decks, was almost wholly dominated by 2 decks, one of which was the combo strategy Dragon Caller. This deck could, with frightening consistency, barf out of Blue Eyes turn 1, which was far and away the best thing you could be doing in a format without removal spells. In 2019, people experimented with Whitestone and Blue Eyes in Dragon Link, but it was dropped for other, more consistent extenders almost immediately. And finally, since 2021, Konami has been dribbling out additional support for the Blue Eyes White Dragon in Megatins and packs designed around the first series anime. While many of them, like the True Light and Blue Eyes Jet Dragon, read crazy, none of them have made the deck anything resembling playable outside of a locals environment. I'll leave you with the wise words of Kaiba.
If at first you don't succeed, blast them with your blue eyes again!